feel like that a wrestling match. Do it.
Good evening, everybody. Going to start the meeting, call the meeting to order. Welcome. This is our final meeting for us for this year in person. 2021. Wow. Can't believe we're here. All right, so again, welcome to tonight's Halifax West Community Council. I'm your chair, Councilor Smith, and we'll start by tabling the 2021 annual report. And do I read the public participation now, or should I wait for someone to put the motion on the floor, clerk?
Motion on the floor first, please.
All right, so I'll ask someone to put that motion on the floor, please. Councilor Mason.
I move that Halifax and West Community Council accept the 2021 Halifax and West Community Council annual report as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Cleary.
Nothing on it.
Nothing on it. Any other councilors? Let me open up the speakers list. Any other councilors with questions? Yeah, Councilor Cleary.
One comment. So if you remember all of the criticism around the provincial government and not meeting, if you look at just the information in the annual report, the number of meetings, the number of developments, all that stuff, okay, you know what? We're friggin' awesome. There you go. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cleary. We appreciate that. All right, so with the nothing else on that for members, do we call for the question and then I do public participation? Okay, so question on the report. Call for question? Question's been called. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, that passes. So we have the public participation for the annual report. Speakers can participate in person or via phone for a maximum of 5 minutes. Keep your comments respectful, on topic, anything related to Halifax West Community Council 2021 activities, and directed to the chair, which is me. For speaking in person, there are lights on the lectern which will turn yellow when you have 1 minute remaining and red when your time is up. Currently, there are no names on the speakers list, so I will call 3 times to ask if there's any additional speakers. Is there anyone in the gallery who'd like to speak today? Anyone in the gallery who'd like to speak today? I could start to point people out, but I won't do that. Anyone in the gallery who'd like to speak today? Seeing none, ask the clerk to confirm if there's any additional speakers waiting to use the phone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nobody's waiting to speak over phone, but please confirm by 3 times. And now I will unmute the microphone. Sorry. Mr. Chair, could you please call for 3 times to
Sorry,
confirm?
I thought you were going to do that. Anyone on
My
the phone wishing to
apologies.
speak to Halifax West Community Council on the annual report? And if you would like to speak, please press *7 to unmute your phone and wait for me to call your name. Or one more time, anyone on the phone, press *7 to unmute. *7 to unmute. All right, nobody on the phone. All right, so I'd like to move on to our next item, which is approval of the minutes, November 16, 2021. Moved by Councilor Cleary, seconded by Councilor Stoddard. Any questions, concerns, amendments, changes? Seeing none, call for the question on the minutes. Question has been called. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, we got minutes. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Members? No. The only thing that I will ask that we do is move public participation ahead of our in-camera, which is 17, move that ahead of 15, which is, I'm assuming that's fine with the committee. All right. And thank you. Moved by Councilor Cleary, seconded by Councilor Mason. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, we got an agenda. Business arising under the minutes. There are none. Call for declaration of conflict of interest. There are none. Motions of reconsideration, none. Motion of rescission, none. Consideration of deferred business, none. Notice of table matters, none. Moving on to the meat and potatoes, 10.1.1, case 22879, amending development agreement for Lovett Lake Estates, Beachville. And I believe Brittany is here to lead us the way on this one.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chair and members of Halifax West Community Council. This presentation is decently long, but it has a lot of good information, so just to give you a little bit of a warning, I'll be speaking for a little while. Okay, so my name is Brittany McLean. I'm a planner with the Urban Enabled Application team here with HRM. Tonight, I'm here with an application by ZAP Consulting on behalf of Armco, the property owner, for an amendment to an existing development agreement on lands to the east of Lovett Lake and Beachville. Okay, so the applicant is asking to make changes to the existing approved development agreement by adding additional lands off of St. Margaret's Bay Road to the east of Lovett Lake into the development agreement, and to add more single-family and townhome lots in an extended Phase 2 and a new Phase 3. So this results in an additional 93 residential units, so it'll total 348 residential units across the entire site. So the entire site here is outlined in yellow. The additional lands proposed to be included in the development agreement are highlighted there in red. So the site fronts along St. Margaret's Bay Road. To the north and the east of the property is the newly developed area of Bayers Lake Business Park and Highway number 3. Immediately south of the lands are commercial uses including an Irving gas station, an auto repair shop, a car wash, and then the municipally heritage registered Beachville Baptist Church and the church center as well. So further south across St. Margaret's Bay Road there, you'll see an existing residential development, and that's Beachville Estates if you're not familiar with it. And then of course to the east of the lands are Lovett Lake itself. Okay, so there's a bit of heritage context that's important to this application that I just want to go over with you. So the site is located adjacent to that registered heritage property known as the Beachville Baptist Church. So the original Beachville Baptist Church was built back in 1844, and since that time, the church and the property have served as an important community focal point for the African Nova Scotia community in Beachville. So traditionally, patrons of the church use Lovett Lake for baptismal ceremonies, and the passage between the church and the lake you'll see is referred to as the baptismal path on the schedules of the proposed development agreement. So it's important to note that the main portion of the baptismal path is located on a subject site. However, as part of this application, the landowner has agreed to deed these lands back to the Baptist Church. So the Beachville Baptist Church property was registered as a municipal registered heritage property back in 2005. So at that time, the application for the registration of the church, the baptismal path wasn't included in that registration. And that was because it's located on a separate property. So at the time, the property owner did not provide their consent for registration. So in the meantime, after that, Armco Capital has since acquired that property. In 2014, there was an archaeological study that was undertaken by the developer prior to any site disturbance and preparation. This was required by the existing development agreement and the province of Nova Scotia. So during this archaeological study, remains of a historic homestead foundation were discovered and excavated. So the archaeological study of the lands concluded that these remains were likely related to the habitations and activity of the first generation War of 1812 black refugees that formed the community there. The report provides an excellent description of what was found on the site, its relevance, and then after the report, the relevant artifacts were cataloged and moved to the Nova Scotia Museum. So that's where those artifacts sit today, is at the Nova Scotia Museum. Okay, so this is just a street view image looking down the St. Margaret's Bay Road. So the Beachville Baptist Church here is off to the left, just past the mailboxes. And the approved access for the site for the first phase is in this approximate area. So that's approved under the existing agreement. So this is a street view image looking up the St. Margaret's Bay Road. The Shepherd's Run subdivision is located to the left, and then the proposed second access for the site for the third phase is in the approximate area where you see the bushes off to the right there. So there's quite a bit of application history on this site as well. I'm just going to try to go through it quickly for you. It all started back on June 26th in 2014. So at that time, Halifax and West Community Council approved the original development agreement, and that development agreement allowed a mixed-use residential and commercial development on the land over 2 phases. So the agreement allows the development of up to 257 dwelling units, and that includes, it's relatively low density there. It's singles, 2 units, and townhomes. And then also a bit of local commercial use. So on September 30th in 2015, so this would have been a year after that original agreement was approved, ARMCO requested to amend the Timberlea Lakeside Beachville MPS to allow for the site to be developed with new public streets, public parks, sidewalks, multi-unit trails, and then 1,293 residential units consisting of singles, 2-unit dwellings, townhomes, and apartment buildings, and then also commercial uses as well. So as part of that application, Regional Council directed staff to begin a planning process to consider writing new planning policies in the community of Beachville. This process included the larger study area of Beachville and a public participation program that involved creating a Beachville African Nova Scotian community liaison group. And then they also hosted several rounds of public meeting with the Beachville community. So this work is currently ongoing. After that, in 2018, Halifax and West Community Council approved an amending agreement to allow a 4-year extension to the commencement date, and that would have been of the original agreement back in 2014. So commencement of development in this development agreement, it's defined differently among different development agreements that we write, but in this one, it's defined as final subdivision approval for phase 1. So site work has since commenced since then, and that included tree clearing. If you drive on the site, you'll see it, and then blasting as well, and that began in August 2021, so that's August of this year. Just important to note is that in October of 2019, ARMCO withdrew the request for the MPS amendment. That was the request for parks and I think 1,200 residential units. So they withdrew that request and then subsequently applied for this application on April 7th, 2020. So this application is one that can be considered under existing MPS policy. Okay, so if you're still with me, on September 29th, 2020, Regional Council acknowledged that this site is no longer part of the MPS application, and they passed a motion to direct staff to ensure a list of actions were taken for the Beachville community. So the ones I've listed on this slide that you can see are only the ones that apply directly to this application, so I'll just quickly go through them. One of them was to engage with the BCDA, which is the Beachville Community Development Association, in the community prior to drafting the amending agreement. The second one was to facilitate the transfer of the baptismal path and burial grounds to the Beachville Baptist Church. And the third one was to address the assets and opportunities identified by the Beachville African Nova Scotian community wherever possible. So Regional Council, at the same time, back in 2020, also approved recommendations to continue the Beachville planning strategy review process, and then also to undertake something you might be familiar with, the Beachville Community Benefit Action Plan. Like I mentioned, these are both still in the works right now. The goal of the Beachville Planning Strategy Review is to create new municipal planning policies for the community of Beachville, with a focus on responding to opportunities that are identified by the community and to the community's concerns. So the goal of the Benefit Action Plan, which is the work that's being done along with the MPS amendments, is more to address matters that are important to the community, but that are outside the scope of those MPS documents. And then, as I mentioned, both of those projects are still ongoing right now. So the site is zoned CDD, Comprehensive Development District, and that's under the Timberley Lakeside Beachville Land Use Bylaw. It's designated urban residential under the municipal planning strategy for that area. The site is currently vacant, though trees have been cleared and site work, including blasting, has begun for phase 1. So we have 2 enabling policies, policy UR11 and UR12 of the Timberley Lakeside Beachville MPS, and those policies enable Community Council to consider a mixed-use development on the site through the development agreement process. So the proposed amending development agreement is also subject to implementation policy IM12, and that's just our general policy evaluation criteria for all discretionary planning approvals that are under the MPS. And then we also have one more policy that we've applied for this one, and that's in the regional plan, which is the policy CH16, and that applies to properties that abut a registered municipal heritage property. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some of the details that are in the existing development agreement that was approved back in 2014. So that agreement allows up to 257 dwelling units. That's singles, 2 units, and townhome units, and that's to be done over 2 phases. So there's also an option for local commercial uses within the existing development agreement. There's a requirement of a second road access to St. Margaret's Bay Road before phase 2 can begin. There's a 15-foot vegetation buffer on all lands for residential or commercial development which abut the Beachville Baptist Church. Additionally, there's a 5-foot vegetation buffer on all lands that abut the property next to the church. That would be the community hall for the church. There's a vegetation buffer consisting of berm, vegetation, and fencing along the northwest boundary line, and that's where the lands, you'll see on the map there, abut the Bears Lake Business Park. Additionally, there's the requirement for archaeological assessment prior to any site work, and within that agreement as well, there's an area of parkland to be created from the St. Margaret's Bay Road along Levitt Lake, and that's connecting to the Chain of Lakes Trail there at the top of the site, and that includes a small area to be designed as a public parking lot on St. Margaret's Bay Road, so that you would park your car there and essentially get public trail access along Levitt Lake and reach the Chain of Lakes Trail at the top. So that's all in the existing agreement. Additionally, there is an area of land that's noted as to be determined, and that's to be provided as parkland or consolidated with the abutting property and be subject to the P2 zone. So these are lands that are adjacent to the Beachville Baptist Church and contain historic grave sites that we knew at the time, but it does not include that baptismal path there. So other than that, the last thing in there is just non-substantive amendments, and those allow extensions to the date of commencement and construction of completion of development. Okay, so getting into the applicant's proposal, ZAP, who's the applicant, is applying to make changes to that existing approved development agreement. The existing agreement, as I mentioned, allows 257 residential dwellings to be built over 2 phases. The application that you have in front of you today is proposing to add 4 parcels of land within, 4 parcels of land off to the right there, and those are proposed to have about 93 residential units, and that's single-family homes and townhomes. So this would total 348 units across all 3 phases, so on the entire site. The areas in orange and yellow that you can see there are proposed single-family home lots, and those in purple are townhome lots. So you'll also see an area along Levitt Lake in black, and that represents the watercourse setback buffer where no development is permitted, and that's as per the land use bylaw. Also, as I mentioned, there's areas of historical and cultural significance identified on the site, and those include that historical baptismal path used by the Beachville Baptist Church, grave sites as well, and also an area of land where the historic building foundation remains were uncovered. So the proposal includes the intent to provide an area of land to the west of the Beachville Baptist Church, and that's the registered heritage property, where the baptismal path and grave sites are located. to the community or to the Baptist church. So this area of land is currently approved as parkland under the existing agreement, so it cannot yet be subdivided and land transferred. So the proposed amending agreement allows this land subdivision to occur if approved. If it is approved, the private land transfer can be completed between the property owner and the Baptist church. So there's additionally 2 areas of parkland proposed in this development agreement amendment. Those are the light green areas that you can see there. They're labeled Park 1 and Park 2. So generally on areas of parkland the sides, there'd be like children's play equipment, benches, and possibly sports courts. So the parkland near the lake is quite sloped. The Parks Department commented that with slopes that challenging, it may be unlikely that they could construct infrastructure to be completely accessible. And then additionally that where the historic baptismal path and grave sites are in proximity to the parkland in this area will require thoughtful design as to not impede on the historic value. So those things would happen after any approval of the agreement. They would be worked out. The existing agreement, as I mentioned, requires that 15-foot vegetation buffer from uses that abut the church. So the proposed amending agreement changes that from 15 feet to 30, so it's gone up to 30 feet there, and also for a fence to be constructed around the Park 2, and that's up at the top there where the proposed building foundation remains were found. Additionally, the development agreement amendment requires that the developer contact the province for archaeological assessment before site work begins on the land for each phase. So phase 1 and 2, that site work, the archaeological studies have already been completed to date. Okay, so the level of engagement completed for this application was consultation through mail-out notification. We mailed 534. We had a newspaper ads and a virtual public information meeting that was held on Thursday, June 17th of this year. So there were approximately 43 attendees at the meeting. Staff additionally received 1 phone call from the public and 8 emails. The website stats, it was viewed 2,600 times by 1,900 unique visitors for an average time of 3 minutes and 44 seconds. So the Beachville Community Development Association and Black Community in Beachville expressed many of the following concerns collectively, both during public engagement for the Beachville Municipal Planning Strategy Review that I mentioned was happening in a subsequent application, and during public engagement for this application. So staff met with a representative from the BCDA bi-weekly for a number of weeks for additional communication and feedback throughout this process. The following comments were made by the BCDA and also the general public at the public information meeting and through email communication. So I'm just going to go through the list here. I just want to make sure I get them all. The community expressed that the baptismal path and gravesite land should be given to the community before the application goes in front of council. Community expressed a mistrust in government and the property owner. There was community fear and frustration about losing historic lands and historic artifacts, concerns about heritage preservation, especially lands near the Baptist church. The community expressed that the lands where the historic homestead remains were found should be deeded to the community and not as HRM parkland, that the community should have a say and be involved in what this area looks like in the future with proper commemoration. The community expressed that more land should be given to the community and that the lands have cultural significance that should be recognized and not built over. There were concerns about blasting amounts and timing during a pandemic, concerns about the number of trees being taken down, inadequate tree buffering, wildlife disappearing, and water quality of Levitt Lake, concerns about traffic impacts beyond what the traffic study covered, the number of crosswalks, the amount of traffic, potential for traffic accidents, traffic implications, and concern about local, the location, of the water retention area to the east, concerns that it was too close to the adjacent existing residential. Additionally, there were concerns about lack of visual and physical barrier along the easternmost property adjacent to the existing residential. There was concerns about lake access. Will it be accessible? Will there be swimming access? Concerns about drainage into the lake and water quality. Concerns about housing prices being too high and lack of affordable housing. The community expressed that this scale of development is intrusive to the community. There was concerns about local school capacity. And finally, concerns that existing vegetation buffers were inadequate around the church, and that the adequacy and amount of parkland provided is not enough, that the community felt. Finally, the final comment was that the community would like to see the lands that front St. Margaret's Bay Road that were previously proposed as parkland undeveloped. Okay, so in result of that public engagement meeting, the applicant did make a number of changes to the proposal in response to the community's concerns that were gathered during engagement. So some of those changes included an increase of the 15 feet to the required 15-foot vegetation buffer abutting the registered Beachville Baptist Church. So like I mentioned previously, it was 15 feet. Now it is 30. The developer is proposing it as 30. The developer has also included a vegetation buffer consisting of a berm, vegetation, trees, and fencing along the easternmost property line that abuts existing residential lands. And that's inclusive of the water retention area that you see there. So that's about, I believe, 500 feet. That buffer will be going along that property line. Additionally, the developer has proposed a visual buffer consisting of a retaining wall and a fence along that property line down toward where you can see townhome lots in purple there, abutting the existing residential properties to the east. So the grade changes there. So along the rest of the property line there, there's a berm, which is kind of like a built-up hill. But in this section, it would be more of a retaining wall with the fencing. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some of the things that are in the proposed amending development agreement. So it includes provisions for the allowance of an extension of the second phase and third phase of development with an increased dwelling unit maximum of 348 across all three phases. The extension of Higgins Avenue to St. Margaret's Bay Road to provide a second public street connection that's required to enable the development of phase 2. The allowance of phases 2 and 3 to be developed concurrently. The removal of previously approved local commercial uses from the list of permitted uses. So the developer, commercial uses were a use that was permitted in the existing agreement. The developer has said, we are not doing commercial uses anymore. This, the entire site will just have residential only. The baptismal pathlands, the ability for them to be consolidated with the abutting Beachville Baptist Church at the time of subdivision approval for phase 1. These lands would be subject to the P2, the community facility zone provisions of the Timberley land use bylaw. There was a provision written in the amending agreement to lower the minimum side yard setback for a certain type of single unit dwelling lots. Those are 40 foot wide, from a minimum of 8 feet to a minimum of 6 feet. There was an addition of municipal parkland where the homestead site is located and a sum of cash in lieu for parkland of $164,000 to be provided for the municipality for Park 1 infrastructure upgrades. And then finally, an increased vegetation buffer from the Beachville Baptist Church. Sorry, I have more. The vegetation, oh right, and then it also includes those vegetation buffers that I was talking about on the easternmost property line as well. And then finally, there is a time extension request for 5 years. And then a time extension, 5 years from the date of commencement of construction, and then additionally 10 years for the date of completion of construction as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, the MPS policies UR11, UR12, and IM12 all enable Community Council to consider the mixed-use development on the site, subject to the development agreement process. So in considering such agreement, Council shall have regard to the following: regard to the adequacy of the mix of housing types, housing mixture and density in the area, usable land for community facilities, road access and traffic generation, services such as sewer and water, and then additionally any other relevant matter of planning concern. So policy CH16, that's the one in the regional plan that I had mentioned, that applies to properties that abut registered municipal heritage property. So council shall consider the protection and buffering from any abutting registered heritage properties, which would be the church. So staff have identified that protection of the baptismal lands and homestead site are imperative for consistency with policy. So the community noted that it was vital that the baptismal path be in ownership of the Beachville Baptist Church. The municipality acknowledges that these lands have significance in the community and should be in their stewardship. So the baptismal path lands are currently designated as Parkland in the existing agreement. The proposed amending agreement removes the Parkland designation from the baptismal path. So it's not possible to convey these lands to the church in advance of the application being decided upon by council, where a parcel containing the path, it must be subdivided from the remaining lands to be developed. So although the development agreement can't require that this area be conveyed to the church, it does include provisions that would facilitate the conveyance, so it allows that land transaction to happen. The subdivision and conveyance would result in the existing approved parkland being divided into two disconnecting parcels. So you can see there the baptismal path kind of cuts the existing parkland in two. The original intent of this parkland was to provide a public parking lot along St. Margaret's Bay Road and an active transportation connection along Levitt Lake, ultimately connecting to that trail there. So the intent was, you know, you've got your parking lot on St. Margaret's Bay Road there, down where it says phase 2 with the orange highlighted area, and then you would have this active transportation path up along Levitt Lake and then connect to the Chain of Lakes Trail. Parkland, we discussed with the Parkland Department that the configuration for this use is no longer warranted by Parkland. So they confirmed with us that connection from St. Margaret's Bay Road to that trail was constructed in 2017, approximately 330 meters east of the site. So it's just as you're along Highway 3 there. And the Parks Department has commented that that sufficiently serves the area with the Colta Trail connection, so they're not seeking that any longer. The proposed agreement no longer includes that portion of parkland along St. Margaret's Bay Road there, just because, like I said, the trail connection was no longer warranted. So the parkland, Park 1, which is, you can see it highlighted there, in the amending agreement is proposed with access from Higgins Avenue and will serve as a community park with children's play equipment. So the homestead site labeled there as Park 2 has also been acknowledged by the municipality as having historical and cultural significance in the community. So this site is currently designated for residential development in the existing agreement. However, in this agreement, in the amending agreement, we've written it to be provided to the municipality as parkland. So the details of proper site commemoration that the community was very interested in would occur once the parkland is required by HRM. Okay, so for our policy review, the MPS discusses the general density for a plan area of 17 persons per acre. However, the density in the existing agreement actually allows a population density of 20 persons per acre. The subject area is a suburban local center under the regional plan, which generally has a density of 20 persons per acre. So the density of 17 persons per acre was based on the capacity of the Timberley wastewater treatment facility at the time. the recently installed lakeside pumping station diversion wastewater infrastructure along the Chain of Lakes Trail provides adequate servicing capacity for this proposal. So Halifax Water has confirmed that this area was considered an area of growth in the infrastructure master plan, and that there are no issues for a density of 20 persons per acre on this site. So the amending agreement does not increase the density beyond the 20 persons per acre that was approved in the original agreement. Additionally, the existing development agreement requires that the development proceed in 2 phases. The requirement stems from policies within the MPS and the requirements of the municipal design guidelines as well. So to proceed from phase 1 to phase 2, a second public road access to St. Margaret's Bay Road is required to be secured or constructed and accepted by the municipality. So this is required before any site work can be initiated for the second phase. The amending development agreement permits the second and third phase of development to occur concurrently at the same time with the second access to St. Margaret's Bay Road. You'll see those shown on the site there. You can see the site access for number 1 and then additionally site access for number 2 pointed out. So a traffic information study, a traffic impact study, sorry, was provided by the applicant, reviewed by HRM Development Engineering, and determined to be acceptable. The findings in the TIS concluded that the site-generated trips are not expected to have a significant impact to levels of performance on St. Margaret's Bay Road. So access is to phases 1 and 2 of the development is approved along St. Margaret's Bay Road east of Beech Tree Run there. This access, that'll be, sorry, I'm speaking about site access number 1 there shown. This access will have a set of traffic lights and intersection upgrades that include a crosswalk as well. Access to the phase 3 portion of the development, so you can see there it says site access number 2, is proposed along the site frontage with St. Margaret's Bay Road east of Shepherd's Run. This access would be right in and right out turn only. So phase 3 does not include any additional crosswalks along St. Margaret's Bay Road. However, our engineering department confirmed for us that through the HRM road safety plan, St. Margaret's Bay Road corridor is actually scheduled to be reviewed this year and may identify or plan for additional marked crosswalks to better support pedestrian connectivity along this area. Okay, so the application was in front of Heritage Advisory Committee on November 10th of this year. The HAC gave a positive recommendation along with considerations to investigate the opportunity to include phase 2 property along St. Margaret's Road to be incorporated as HRM Parkland for a future trailhead parking lot, and to work with the community to develop street and park names that were reflective of Beachville's heritage. So for the first HAC recommendation there regarding the parking lot and trail access, I'll note again, this option was deemed not warranted by the Parks Department. It would require an easement across the Baptismal Path lands in order to do something like that. The community has expressed many times to us that they would like this land unencumbered. So a trail across the Baptismal Path would hold encumbrances on that land and also impact the protection of the path. So the community truly feels that this land belongs to them, and an HRM path across the lands would really not be appropriate on this site. So the second recommendation that HAC made there for street and park naming is a process that takes place actually during land subdivision with the Civic Addressing Department. So the applicant did reach out during this process to look at street naming that would be that would reflect the heritage of the community. At the time, we reached out to the Civic Addressing Department, and they replied that there were actually no registered names for this community to choose from at the time. So I looked into the process a little bit. In order for a street name to be registered, members of the community must apply to the Civic Addressing Department for review against the bylaw for street naming. So once there's a list of names, they can be chosen and assigned during the subdivision process. So the street names shown in the agreement that you can see there are not approved. They would not be approved during this planning application process. So they could be subject to change during the subdivision process, which again, that would happen outside of this agreement, that would happen after. Park commemorative naming is also done through the Civic Addressing Department. So they maintain a list of commemorative names available for park naming, which had already been vetted and approved by council. So twice a year, the Civic Addressing Department, you might be familiar with, bring either new commemorative names, new commemorative names to council for approval. So I've added the link to the website there. That's just for the public in case we do have members of the public that are interested in maybe making an application for some of those street naming. Okay, so staff have reviewed the proposal in terms of all of the relevant policy criteria and advised that the proposal is reasonably consistent with the intent of the Timberlea Lakeside Beachville MPS. So the proposed density, housing mixture, uses, phasing, and road networks are all reasonably consistent with the general housing targets that are within the MPS and do not detract from the general residential character of the community. The historical and cultural significance of the lands and proximity to the municipally registered heritage property have all been considered during this application, and in results have resulted in the protection of the homestead site and conveyance of the baptismal path and grave sites to the Beachville Baptist Church. So additional adequate usable lands for the public have been provided through the Parkland dedication as well. Therefore, staff recommend that Halifax and West Community Council approve the proposed amending development agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany, and you can take a breath and you can get a drink of water.
Thank you.
Any members of Community Council with questions of clarification? Councilor Cuddle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Brittany. Did you have a sip of water there? That was like, that was quite the presentation. Thank you. Lots of detail. I was just wondering, you were talking about the access points, access point 1 and 2 off of St. Margaret's Bay Road and the impact on traffic. I note that it looks like there's a series of semis that are right on St. Margaret's Bay Road. I'm assuming their driveways are on St. Margaret's Bay Road?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So those townhomes in that specific area have a shared driveway. So there would be one driveway entrance from that area, and then every single one of those townhomes would then access from that shared driveway. So instead of every townhome having to turn in off the St. Margaret's Bay Road.
And is that main driveway off of St. Margaret's Bay Road? So would that be considered a third access point?
I don't believe. I think it's off of Higgins Avenue.
So it's off of like in behind?
Yeah, like you'd have to turn off of St. Margaret's Bay Road onto Higgins Avenue and then into the driveways. I believe that is correct, but I might, yes, okay, that is correct.
That's correct, okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other members with questions of clarification? Seeing none, I have two. The number for public participation, that didn't include the other community meetings and stakeholder meetings that you had between the official public hearing and this public hearing, right?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that's correct. So that was just for the public information for this application. The other public information meetings that have been held through that MPS work that's happening and currently going on in the Beachville community, they have had different numbers of attendances there, but this was just for this application, correct?
Thank you. And then related to the policy, if this gets approved, does this allow for flexibility for commercial, or it's written that in a way that only residential will be allowed on the sites?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in this development agreement, it does not permit commercial. So it's been completely removed from the development agreement, and it is residential only.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's it for me. So now I'll invite the applicant to come up and present, and you have 2 minutes to present because Brittany used all your time. I'm just kidding. Chris almost had a heart attack when I said that. No, you have 10 minutes. Just recognize yourself, and when you're ready to go, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of council. My name is Chris Marquides. I'm a licensed professional planner with ZAP Consulting. With me here is Mark Ouellette from Armco Communities. I'm here today representing our client, Armco Communities, on an amendment to an existing development agreement for the properties abutting Lovett Lake in Beachville. Before I begin, I want to take a moment to recognize the efforts of HRM staff in working with us on this application. And I especially want to thank Brittany for her presentation. It was incredibly thorough, so I'll try to keep my presentation brief in contrast to that because she basically covered everything that I was going to cover anyways. So I wanted to briefly go over some of the background for this application. As Brittany explained, a version of this development agreement has already been approved by this community council in 2014, and that's indicated on the dotted yellow line, the lands encompassing the dotted yellow line on this slide. In 2015, Armco purchased lands abutting their existing development site to add to the development in the future. These lands are shown in the dotted teal line, and the intention was always to bring these lands into the development project. In 2019, ZAP applied for a development agreement specifically for on the Phase 3 lands on Armco's behalf. So again, those lands outlined by the dotted teal line. However, in consultation with HRM staff, we understood their desire to use this opportunity to bring these lands into an amending agreement of the existing DA to deal with some housekeeping amendments, namely the ability to deed the baptismal path to the Beachville Baptist Church directly instead of requiring these lands be deeded to the municipality as Parkland first. We agreed with staff's request and revised our application to amend the existing agreement instead. During this time, Armco also began the subdivision and site preparation process for Phase 1 of the existing development agreement. So this slide shows the boundaries of the existing development agreement. Note that the existing agreement contemplates a second connection through the Phase 3 lands to St. Margaret's Bay Road as required by the policies in the municipal planning strategy. The existing development agreement permits a total of 257 units at a population density of 20 persons per acre. So I wanted to highlight that the preliminary subdivision work is in progress on Phase 1 as enabled by the existing agreement. So this is just a drone shot showing the work in progress. In the amending agreement, the overall number of units permitted is 348 versus 257 in the existing agreement. However, the density of the development over the 3 phases remains the same at the existing 20 persons per acre. The number of units permitted in each phase is changing to accommodate more efficient construction. This can be seen by the increased number of units in Phase 2 because Phase 2 will extend into the new lands to create a second access to St. Margaret's Bay Road, and then Phase 3 will be the lands, the rest of those additional lands that are being brought in as part of this amending agreement. Additionally, the local commercial uses permitted in the existing development agreement are also being removed as part of this amending agreement. So regarding stormwater, there are a number of proposed changes to the existing development agreement. And I want to reiterate that the 20-meter watercourse buffer is being maintained in this amending agreement as indicated by the hatched line on the concept plan. There are also 2 stormwater management areas proposed as part of this development. Stormwater retention and filtration will be handled underground and grassed over. Stormwater areas will be designed in accordance with Halifax Water and Nova Scotia Environment's requirements in order to balance pre-development and post-development stormwater flows. So the location of proposed parkland remains relatively the same as the existing agreement with a 1.6 hectare park along Lovett Lake. However, an additional 0.15 hectare space is being proposed to commemorate a historic homestead that was on the site. 3 archaeological studies have been completed to understand historic settlement on the subject properties, and this homestead is the only evidence of settlement across the total land area. And these remains have been archived in the Nova Scotia Museum, as Brittany indicated. What is changing is that the baptismal path and cemetery lands are proposed to be deeded directly over to the Beachville Baptist Church instead of to the municipality as Parkland. And on approval of this amending agreement, this will happen sometime in Q1 of 2022 at the time of final subdivision approval of Phase 1. Additionally, the amending agreement outlines a payment of $164,000 to HRM for park equipment in the development. We received a lot of good feedback at the public information meeting and have revised the concept plan to reflect some of that feedback. First, the vegetation buffer between the Beachville Baptist Church and abutting residential uses will be increased from 15 feet, as outlined in the existing agreement, to 30 feet. And second, a buffer consisting of a berm, vegetation, and fencing along the easternmost property line abutting the existing residential uses will be created. So at the bottom of the slide here, a cross-section is shown. From right to left, you'll see the proposed road to St. Margaret's Bay. So it's Higgins Avenue, the proposed road to St. Margaret's Bay, then the proposed residential dwelling units, then a significant grade change between the proposed residential dwelling units and the property line, then the proposed berm, and then the abutting residential property line. So that's from right to left on your screen. In summary, I would like to highlight the following items. Phase 1 and Phase 2 of this agreement are well underway, with Phase 1's tentative subdivision already approved and under construction, and Phase 2 subdivision has been applied for. Additionally, the intention of the amending agreement is to complete the concept planning for the entirety of the subject lands and fulfill the intent of the municipal plan policy. The amending agreement also seeks to better commemorate the historic Beachville community and add provisions for deeding over the baptismal path lands to the church instead of the municipality as Parkland. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, and that was probably about 2 minutes, so I think you did it. Any members with questions or clarifications? I'm not seeing no one on the board. Before I go, all right, I see no one. Again, thank you. So two questions. The first one is related to the question I asked earlier around flexibility for commercial. So as there was a commercial in the original agreement, but then that was changed and now it's all residential. So you don't see the need at all to have the opportunity to have commercial in the development agreement just in case. And I really think about the lands that are on the Phase 2 of the old agreement that's closer to St. Margaret's Bay in the corner, where it's abutting the street, where that could be an opportunity for commercial.
Mr. Chair, yeah, we don't necessarily see a need for commercial for our own perspective, mainly because the commercial that was going to be allowed there initially, when we looked at what the type of permitted uses that could take place, it was not necessarily conducive to something that we thought we could sell. So we switched it to residential. I know there might be some concerns about having a portion or a subdivision coming off from St. Margaret's Bay Road. We don't necessarily see an issue. These would be, I think, two units would be there, 2 houses. But no, we didn't have any interest in continuing with the commercial just because of when we looked at what type of commercial uses could take place there, it would be a hard sell, we believe.
Okay. And then the other question is related to the homestead lands. What obviously things will develop as you go, but do you have any initial plans on how you'll commemorate those lands and for future?
Yeah, we believe, too, Mr. Chair, we believe that it's much, it should be more of a community-led initiative in terms of what should take place on this property. ARMCO would be quite supportive in any way that we could. I know there's been talk about Cenotaph, for instance, that came from the community. I don't think it's for us to determine what should take place there. We've decided to, in negotiations with the municipality, we thought it was a good idea to provide this property as Parkland and then let the community decide what they want to see on it.
Okay, so I misunderstood. So that the homestead lands would also be part of the Parkland that would be deeded to the church as well?
It's part of Parkland dedicated to the municipality.
Oh, to the municipality.
So deeded over to the municipality.
So the lands that are abutting the church would be deeded to the church, and then these lands, the homestead lands, would be deeded to the municipality?
That's correct. I mean, there was discussions at one point whether the lands where the homestead was located would be deeded over to the community. There's an issue in discussions with HRM on who would maintain this property. And, in terms of the resources of HRM, it was decided maybe it would be a better idea that this was HRM land, but that the community would take part in deciding what would go there and provide some feedback, and then it'd be open to the public.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We got someone on the board. Councillor Morse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. Could you just briefly describe what the plan is for stormwater on the site and whether it's going into the lake? Thank you.
So there are two stormwater retention, stormwater management and retention areas that will be all, so basically catch basins drain into the retention areas. It's all stored underground and then slowly filter into the relevant water courses.
And if I could ask a subsequent question, and how is it filtered?
To be honest with you, Councillor, I don't 100% know. I'm not a civil engineer. I know that they will follow all the Halifax Water and Nova Scotia Environment's requirements for filtration and collection.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if I could add, like phase one is fully designed and it has been approved by HRM Engineering. As Chris was saying, like earlier on, we've been building for a number of months, this phase one. At some points, we had 2 blasting crews from Dexter on site, 2 pipe crews. It's very well advanced. A few weeks ago, they were talking about asphalting the streets. So we're at that point that we might not be able to do it this year because of winter conditions, but it's very much progressed. And yes, it's fully designed. It's, we're about to be in the springtime, like we should be in a position where phase one is complete.
Thank you.
Councilor, good? Okay, great. All right. I think that's it. And on a side note, Mr. Ouellette, you kind of look familiar. Do you have someone in the city that, do you have a doppelganger, maybe, possibly?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. Or is it actually a twin?
It's a twin. I used to be an HRM employee years ago, but my twin brother Luke, yes, he works for the municipality.
Oh, okay. So family dinners, are you the big bad brother and he's like the good brother, the one worked for the government and one worked for the private developer? Is that?
I like to think I'm the good brother.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you both for presenting tonight. So we are now going to open the public hearing. Let me just get myself situated here. So again, thank you for joining us tonight for the public hearing. This process will start with, okay, I missed all of this in the beginning. So we did the staff presentation and we had heard from the applicant. Now we ask for any speakers who'd like to participate via phone or in person. They have a maximum of 5 minutes. Please keep your comments respectful, on topic, and directed to the chair. For those speaking in person, there are lights on the lectern which will turn yellow when you have 1 minute remaining. Red is when your time is up. After everyone on the list has given an opportunity to speak, I will call 3 times if there's any additional speakers. And I don't believe anyone has signed up, correct? So no one has signed up officially. Is anybody in the audience who'd like to speak on this topic at all? Anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this topic? Anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this topic? All right, we'll go to the phones. Ms. Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No one is waiting to speak, but I'm going to unmute the phone now, so please confirm by asking 3 times.
So if there's anybody on the phone who'd like to speak on item 10.1.1, please press *7 to unmute your phone. If you're on the phone, press *7 to unmute. *7 to unmute if you'd like to speak for tonight's public hearing. Having no responses, I ask that we close the public hearing. Moved by Councilor Cleary, seconded by Councilor Stoddard. And I'm assuming there's no need to respond from the applicant. So we will move on to the item itself. So I ask if Councilor Stoddard would mind putting the motion on the floor, please.
Yes, 2289, amending development agreement for Lovett Lake Estates, Beachville. I move that Halifax and West Community Council, 1, approve the proposed amending agreement, which shall be substantially in the same form as set out in the Attachment A of the October 19th, 2021 report. And 2, require the agreement to be signed by the property owner within 240 days or any extension therefore granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of the final approval by council or any other body as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising thereunder shall be at an end.
Seconded by Councilor Clary. Councilor Stoddard, the floor is yours.
Yes. Chair, I'd also like to amend this motion. I'm not sure when I exactly do that.
So it's up to you. You can do it now, or you can, if you have any remarks, you could say your remarks and let council respond, and then add your amendment at the end. So whatever you feel is appropriate.
Okay. Just a note, I believe that the requests of the historical Beachfield community have been met to their satisfaction in the existing agreement. The developer agrees in the development agreement that the baptismal path and the deed to the lands of the Beachfield Baptist Church will be transferred to the Beachfield Baptist Church. Currently, the deeded area is designated as Parkland. However, the current owner will provide Parkland elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stoddard. Anyone else who has comments or questions on this item? Seeing nobody on the board, Councilor Stoddard, now if you'd like to put your amendments on the floor, you could do that. Just buzz yourself in. Buzz yourself in. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to add that Halifax and West Community Council requests the development officer investigate the opportunity to include the Phase 2 property along St. Margaret's Bay Road to be incorporated as HRM Parkland for future trailhead parking lot access to serve as a gateway access to the interpretive panels to the heritage significance of the area. And I'd also like to add that Halifax and West Community Council recommend to Regional Council to direct the Chief Administrator Office to consider street and park names that are reflected of the Beachville's heritage. I so move.
Seconded by Councilor Morse. Any comments on that at all?
No, I think it stands for itself. I think they're relative to this motion.
Thank you, Councilor Stoddard. Seeing nobody on the board on the amendment, just giving you a chance to buzz in last minute. No? Okay. Call for the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Not Mr. Chair. Can we just see the amendment written?
Oh, sure. It's should be on your screen. Yep. Could give you a second to read it. Just let me know when you're good.
And could we just get, I see Maggie Holm coming.
Oh, sure.
Staff commentary on the amendment?
Of course. All right. Maggie, the floor is yours.
There we are. Sorry, I just felt like I needed to come up and just ask for a point of clarification on what the councillor is intending with the amendment. Where this is a development agreement, it's already written, so the staff report contains the draft development agreement, and what you're proposing, I want to make sure that we're clear on what it is you're asking for and whether the existing agreement as it stands in the report, whether that's enabled or not. It may or may not be, which may require an amendment to the draft development agreement. So if I could just get clarification on what it was you were seeking.
Councilor Stoddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I get some advice from our solicitor, please?
Sure. Solicitor. Let's bring your mic down. There you go.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So these were the amendments for the recommendation coming out of Heritage Advisory Committee. And I believe, and Councillor Stoddard, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the direction for the parkland, is that what you're most curious about, Maggie? that this would just be a request for the development officer during the subdivision process to investigate that, which I believe would be enabled under the development agreement and not an amendment to the development agreement itself.
That would be a non-binding.
Correct. Yes.
That's what you're seeking, then? Excellent. I just wanted to ensure that, again, the agreement.
Just press your mic real quick, sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to ensure that what it was you were seeking was actually something that the development agreement, as it's currently written, could allow for that contemplation or not, and that we wouldn't be surprised at a permitting process that it couldn't be considered. So thank you for the clarification. I just wanted to ensure that the agreement would do what it was council was trying to have it do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Cleary. That clears.
Can I have a follow-up question?
Yeah, of course. Councilor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in our development agreements, as I understand it, at this point, when staff are presenting and we're at a public hearing, there has been a negotiation and there has been a settlement on what the actual agreement is going to be. So when I'm looking at this, would there be subsequent negotiation required to go back to the applicant? Or would this be, we are passing this and this is kind of ancillary to the agreement, which doesn't affect the agreement unless it requires some change, and if it's a non-substantive change, then you can just come back here without another public hearing and say, oh, and by the way, we're making this small change, community council, do you want to agree to this? I'm just curious, what is the next step if we have this amendment passed?
Thank you. Through the chair to the councillor. And that's sort of the question I was seeking. So as it's worded now, and as I understand it, it's a non-binding thing. So it's a recommendation to the development officer to consider that that parcel of land be used as something other than is considered in the agreement right now. If that conversation was had at permitting process and the developer had chosen to continue on with residential as the development agreement allows, it would continue as residential, because the motion is not a binding recommendation. It is something for a conversation to be had through the development officer and the developer at the time that permits are had. So if it continues on as residential as the developer currently seeks, there would be no change, and it would continue on as residential as the developer presently feels they wish to develop it as. So no change would be required.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cleary. Anyone else with questions, clarification on the amendment before we vote? All right, call for the question on the amendment. Question has been called. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. All right, the amendment's passed. So question on the main motion, or the amended main motion. Question has been called. All those in favor on the amended main motion say aye. All those opposed say nay. All right, that passes. Thank you, everyone, for all the work on this. Very, very appreciated. And also, Councilor Studdard, thank you for everything you've done on this as well. So moving on to the next item, which is correspondence, petitions, delegations. Do you have any correspondence, Ms. Clerk?
Yes, correspondence has been received for item 10.1.1, and this correspondence has been circulated to the Community Council.
Thank you. 11.2 petitions. Any petitions, members? No petitions. Presentations, we have none. Information items brought forward, we have none. Moving on to reports, starting with 1311, proposed 22 meeting schedule. Who'd like to put this on the floor? Councilor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am happy to put the motion on that Halifax and West Community Council approve the proposed 2022 Halifax and West Community Council meeting schedule as outlined in the staff memorandum.
Seconded by Councilor Mason. Any comments on the schedule at all?
I've already inputted all of these into my calendar. I didn't see any conflicts. I don't know if anyone else did, so there you go.
All right,
I trust
thank
our
you.
clerk.
Thank you. The only thing, just for members in public, and we've now included in our meeting schedule, proposed meeting schedule, that in-person and virtual, just in case for whatever reason we need to change things up, as we saw this week. So that is something that you'll see with many other committees, that the proposed schedule will have both virtual and in person, just to allow that flexibility. So if there's any, if no, Councilor Cleary?
One other comment. So when we have our schedule sent to us for council and our committees, at the bottom, you'll see a listing of significant dates, just so people are aware about the dates that are around there. Councilor Hensby brought this up on Audit and Finance earlier today, and I thought it was a good comment. In early August, of course, we have now officially across Canada and here in Nova Scotia and HRM, we're celebrating and commemorating Emancipation Day.
All right.
And which is not included on here, so I would just suggest we, for future calendars, just include that as a significant date.
Could we make that amendment for, and update the calendar, please? I got the head nod from our clerk. Thank you. So that's a good comment, Councilor Cleary. So thank you for that. Call for the question on the meeting schedule. Question's been called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Great, we have a schedule. Moving on to item 13, 1-2, case 23120, Halifax Mainland Land Use Bylaw amendments to change the R2 zone requirements for semi-detached dwellings in Mainland South. Now, we have a presentation if members would like to see that. All right, so I heard it definitely. So who is Megan or Britt? Who's? Oh, okay, yep. Hello.
So yes, there is a presentation, but it was just kind of as needed. I don't have a
Okay.
formal presentation prepared. I was saving that for the public hearing, but I am happy to open this up and show a couple pictures.
Yeah, we can do that because this is scheduling a public hearing. So yeah, if you wanna just do your quick version, and we can save the longer version for the public hearing. That'd be great.
So really, this presentation is just to give a little bit of context about what this application is. So this application is, again, the applicant is Armco Capital Inc., and they have requested to amend the R2 zone of the Halifax Mainland Land Use Bylaw. Specifically, they are asking to reduce the side yard setback and main building separation distance requirements for semi-detached dwellings, and it will be limited to the Mainland South Secondary Plan area. And so this map here, and I apologize, it's really hard to fit all the information on one slide, but this is a map of the affected lands. There is quite a large area that's already developed with mostly single and 2-unit dwellings, and that would be the harder to see area to the east, and then along Herring Cove Road, you can see there's some larger swaths of R2 zone lands that have yet to be developed. So primarily the Mainland South Plan area does kind of circle around Herring Cove Road. So all of those areas in the dark gray, those would be the affected lands, and all of those property owners and residents on that land have been notified about this application during our engagement period. So just to illustrate what changes are happening, so these would be the requirements for a semi-detached dwelling if someone was to come in to get a permit. So right now, the minimum lot area is 2,500 square feet. That's not changing. The minimum lot frontage per unit would be 25 feet, again, not changing. So important to note here that because those requirements are not changing, there will not be an increase in density with these proposed amendments. The maximum lot coverage remaining 35%. The minimum front setback is remaining at 20 feet. The minimum rear yard setback, 8 feet. And then the maximum building height will be remaining at 35 feet. And then those two items highlighted in red there, the minimum side yard setback is currently 8 feet. They're asking to reduce that to 4 feet. And then the minimum building separation, they're asking to reduce that from 12 feet to 8 feet. So what this table I really want to highlight is that there is no increase in density with this proposal because you still have to have your same lot size. And really it just, because of that lot coverage requirement, it's not enabling any larger housing. It would just be enabling a reconfiguration of the building footprint to allow a different layout within the home, which Armco has expressed as a desire through in the market conditions right now. And that's everything, but I will get into more detail during my presentation for the public hearing, and I'm happy to hear any feedback that you'd like to hear in that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to put the motion on the floor. Councillor Cotto and I both share this area, and I'm sure she may have some questions or feedback on this as well. So I move that Halifax and West Community Council give first reading to consider approval of the proposed amendment to the land use bylaw for Halifax mainland as set out in attachment A of the staff report dated November 3rd, 2021 to reduce the side yard setback and separation distance requirements for semi-detached dwellings in the R2 zone in mainland south and schedule a public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Cotto.
And just very quickly on this one, as Ms. Mon mentioned, it's not adding density. It does allow for a different shape of a building and therefore a different layout within that building. I've heard from folks, everything from for, against, and simply just curious. They don't understand why the change and what the implications could be. There's not actually a ton of land within the area that is zoned R2, but those that are, some of it is already existing. This in particular is required, as Ms. Bond mentioned, ARMCO, because they are going to be building and will allow them to bring some buildings that are slightly different than what they would be allowed under the current zoning and the setbacks in that zoning. So I'm interested to go to the public hearing and hear what the community has to say and what the applicant has to say about this, because it could be beneficial. We don't know until we hear from all of that. So anyway, happy to have this go forward and see what the results will be from this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary, and Councillor Cotto, you're next. Just as a reminder for anyone else that's on the list, because we're scheduling a public hearing, it's fine to mention clarification pieces or pieces that were mentioned by Ms. Maud, but anything other than that, like opinion or comments on your feelings, should wait till after the public hearing. So feel free to speak as freely as you like, other than things that should be wait until we hear from the public.
All right. Yeah, so just clarification from Megan. With the letters that were sent out, I believe 3,774 letters were sent, because that's the number of existing R2 units in the planning area.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So the mail out that we did for the public engagement for this application, we sent out 3,574 letters, and that was to anyone who owns a property that is zoned R2 or lives on a property that is zoned R2. So it's for residents and owners.
Yeah. And how many responses did you get?
We heard from 167 people.
Okay. And what were the main concerns in the letters that you received?
I can give a brief overview of that, but I will get into detail on that in my public hearing presentation. But generally, we heard concerns about loss of privacy, concerns about potential increased risk of fire, and then changes and effects to the existing character of the already built-up neighborhoods that are affected by this application. There were some concerns that there will be increased traffic and increased density in the area, but as I highlighted, there will not be any increase in density. There will not be a direct increase in traffic as a result of this application.
Right. So, I mean, the increase in traffic comes in general from the development as it is. This will not change the density or the number of units on the land. So
exactly,
this change won't increase traffic or density issues. And do we have any sense of potentially how many future units this will impact in the area?
No, I don't have those numbers. It all depends on the subdivision applications that come through our door, and those can change throughout time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, one other thing, I'm just wondering, is there any consideration of impact on light or landscaping or environmental impact at this point? Or is that something that can be discovered through the public hearing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So are you asking about considerations for landscaping for this? And
Light and impact on.
So this is an amendment to the land use bylaw. So it would just be through the permit application process. We would be applying any of the regulations in the land use bylaw that already currently exist. So we still have our water course buffer requirements. And then in this area, there's limitations about how much of the front yard you could pave for a house, but none of that would be affected through this application.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Cottle. Anyone else with questions, clarification? All right, so the motion was on the floor. Yeah, the motion on the floor, so call for the question. Question's been called. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, this public hearing will be scheduled. Moving to 1313, case 2355, discharge and development agreement for property at 5885 Spring Garden Road. Councilor Mason, I'm assuming this is you?
Yes, sir. I move that Halifax and West Community Council, one, approve by resolution the discharging agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in Attachment A of the staff report dated June 3rd, 2021, and two, require the discharging agreement be signed by the property owner within 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later, otherwise this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end. I so move.
Seconded by Councilor Cleary. Councilor Mason.
I think it's cool. I think it's cool that the developer has come back to us and said, thank you for approving a 21-story tower, but we actually like what we can build under the center plan better. And they're going to come back and they're going to do that. So I have no objection to the discharge, and I look forward to the project going ahead as proposed now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilor Mason. There's nobody else on the list, so I ask for the question to be called. Questions be called. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, moving on to 1314, land use bylaw amendment for front yard setbacks in the C2C Dutch Village Road mixed use zone. Councilor Morse. All right, floor is yours.
Thank you. I move that Halifax and West Community Council give first reading to consider approval of the proposed amendments to the C2C Dutch Village Road mixed-use zone of the land use bylaw for Halifax mainland as set out in Attachment A of the staff report dated November 12th, 2021, to increase the minimum required front and flanking yard setbacks and schedule a public hearing.
Seconded by Councilor Cleary. Anything on this one, Councilor Morse?
This is very exciting for me personally because this was one of my first motions, and it's just about trying to reverse a zone that allowed 100% lot coverage on Dutch Village Road and didn't consider the need to leave a little bit of space for sidewalks that didn't exist then but we're trying to install now. So this will give a little more room for not only sidewalks, but also proposed bike lanes and that sort of thing. So I'm very happy to see it.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Cleary.
Just a quick question, which I should have asked earlier on the other one we were scheduling a public hearing for, to our legislative staff. When might we see these public hearings?
That's something that I have to communicate to the planners as well. But from this meeting, I believe there's only 2 that has to be scheduled, so then it'll be in January. But that's something I have to confirm it with the planners.
Okay.
All right, question on this motion? Question been called. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. All right, scheduled public hearing scheduled. Moving to our next item, which is 1315, case 23746 and 22896 MPS and development agreement amendments for Seton Ridge, Bedford Highway, Seton Road, and Lacewood Drive, Halifax. Who'd like to put this on the floor? Councilor Morse.
I can put this on the floor, Mr. Chair. I move that Halifax and West Community Council recommend that Regional Council, 1, give first reading to consider the proposed amendments to the Halifax Municipal Planning Strategy, MPS, for the Seton Ridge neighborhood as set out in Attachment A of the staff report dated November 29th, 2021, to allow for the elimination of a required walkway connection to Bayview Road, Halifax, and schedule a public hearing. And 2, approve the proposed amendments to the Halifax MPS for the Seton Ridge neighborhood as set out in Attachment A of the staff report dated November 29th, 2021.
Seconded by Councillor Mason.
Excuse me,
Sorry.
Mr. Chair, there's one.
There's more, sorry. I'll continue.
My apologies.
It's further recommended that Halifax and West Community Council give notice of motion to consider the proposed amending development agreements as set out in attachments B1 and B2 of the staff report dated November 29th, 2021, to allow changes to the Seton Ridge mixed-use neighborhood at Bedford Highway, Seton Road, and Lacewood Drive, Halifax. The public hearing for the proposed amending development agreements shall be held concurrently with the public hearing referenced in recommendation number 1.
Thank you, and sorry for interrupting, and it was already seconded by Councillor Mason. Anything on this one, Councillor?
No, this is just moving forward on Seton Ridge. The walkway change is a fairly minor change that wasn't able to be accommodated because of a grade issue. And otherwise, we're just moving forward on this development that's been a long time in the making.
All right, thank you, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, as Councillor Morris said, this is a long time in the making. I'm sure Councillor Mason, who is the longest-serving member of this particular community council, would have seen this long before I did, but I can remember when I joined council in 2016, getting emails, phone calls, and actual handwritten letters from Sister Joan, from the Sisters of Charity, because they couldn't sell the land until we started approving it. And it's just a slight commentary that it's amazing to me how long some developments take and how quickly others move. But this is one that I'm happy to see, this come forward as a public hearing for this thing. I can remember the last time we did this when we thought, oh, we're almost there. The thing was the road and the grade and ice control, and now it's a pathway. It's amazing just the little intricacies and the idiosyncrasies of particular developments and how they move forward. So Sister Joan is no longer the head of the Sisters of Charity, that we have a new head of the order, but I know she and others will be happy to see this moving forward, even though their interest is no longer in this.
Don't forget the crows.
And the crows. The crows have moved slightly.
Right.
They now poop on the Bedford Highway.
Right, so that was another thing. Councillor Mason.
That is, however, not a land use issue. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say, because this has been a long time coming, but it's also been a long time coming because of complications of ownership and complications of extracting the sisters from their previous arrangement with the other developers. So I was a little, I'm saying that primarily because I know that Sarah from All Nova Scotia is listening online, and I just think that needs to be noted. So I'd like to thank staff for bringing this forward, and I'm glad that this is finally happening, and I think it will be a significant improvement. It's a perfect place for that kind of density, very close to employment centers. So very excited to see it move forward. Yeah, can't wait till we actually see some holes being dug and roads being put in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we are scheduling a public hearing, Mr. Mason, so keep an open mind, remember that. So moving to ask for the question on this item. Questions been called. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. All right. So moving to our next, which is motions. We have none. We moved our public participation item up before we went into camera. So again, I will read. Any member of the public who has registered with the clerk's office on this matter will be given 5 minutes to address the topic. Some of you here in the chamber or in person, some of you are here in the council chamber in person, and some of you are participating over the phone. When I call your name, you may come up and begin speaking. Now the clerk will give some technical instructions for speakers on the phone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speakers who are on the line, please make sure that your webcast is muted and you're listening using your phone. When you hear your name announced, press star 7 to unmute your phone and wait for the chair to tell you that it's your turn to speak. Once you've finished your comments and answering any questions or clarification, please hang up your phone and watch the rest of the meeting using the YouTube live stream.
Thank you. And we have one pre-registered speakers today, which is Adrian Malley. And Adrian, are you in the meeting? And remember, again, press star 7 to unmute your phone if you are in the meeting.
I'm here, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
I thank you very much. I apologize that I couldn't be with you tonight. And my question is about an article that I read in the Herald on the weekend and saw some news coverage on in CBC, and it is the West End development that has emerged in the media in recent days. And I am a resident of Mayfield Avenue off Mumford Road. And I am very interested to know at what stage is the proposed Cushman-Wakefield development. What stage has it reached? Because if it's in the news, it must be on someone's radar. And I am hopeful that there will be a process that will allow time for public input and effective input that could actually change some of what I've heard being proposed. So I come this evening only because I am concerned that we have a massive development being talked about in the media, and I'm looking for some assurance from the community council that there is a process in place that is not just going to end up with, you know, a meeting that says this is what it's going to be and there really isn't anything we can do.
So thank you for joining us this evening in speaking on that. Council did have a discussion on setting a process for what you've asked around public participation. So what I'm wondering, and Councillor Cleary is here, who represents the area. Councillor Cleary, if it's easier, we could get your information passed to Councillor Cleary, and I'm sure he'd be happy to reach out to you to have a conversation directly, if that works for you.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I would intend to be contacting your planning department as well, but there will
Can she hear me if I speak on
community. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
There will, I fully expect that there will be a community group in this area that will be, you know, getting together to talk about what input we can have as a community into a development that on first blush looks like it has very little or no green space, no relation to environmental principles of development, et cetera. But, you know, I have a 22-story building staring down the back of my yard. And the first time we heard about it was a meeting we got invited to. And when we went to that meeting, it was grandfathered, that project, that land, and there wasn't a thing we could do about it. So I just don't want to go through that again. And I'm happy to call Sean Cleary. But I did want to come to this council meeting and get it in your minutes that I've had several conversations with people who are extremely concerned about what's been seen so far in the media.
Thank you, and Councillor Cleary has buzzed in, and you'll be able to hear him in 1 second. He'll respond.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. It isn't standard practice during our participation to have a back and forth, but just very quickly, what council voted on yesterday was to begin a process which will include quite a lot of public engagement. So the process is a master planning process for that area. So it's not one particular development, but it's actually setting a road network, the policies, the rules in place for the entire area that's under what's called a future growth node. And so I would be happy to chat with you at your convenience after this. And there will be lots of opportunity for residents to have input into the policy going forward. And I suspect staff are being optimistic when they say a year and a half to 2 years to get that put together, but at least a 2-year process in order to get the rules in place for development on that site. So I just want to give you that assurance, and lots of opportunity over the next couple of years to have input.
Thank you very much.
And thank you again for joining us, and we'll make sure your information gets passed along to Councillor Cleary.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public on the phone who'd like to speak this evening to Community Council? Again, press *7 if you'd like to speak. *7 if you'd like to speak to Community Council. *7. All right. Moving on to in camera. So do we need to go in camera for this item? Yeah, okay, we need to go in camera. All right, so I ask for a motion to go in camera. Moved by Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Cottle. We are going in camera.
Do, 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 do. Oh my goodness. Why is my mic still on?
We're good. Thumbs up from the crew inside. Thank you. All right, so we're back in public. Could someone put the motion on the floor, please?
I move that, oh, it doesn't have the public motion. Yeah, I move that Halifax West Community Council confirm the decision made in camera and forwards it to Regional Council, or words to that effect. Do you want to lawyer me up there, Meg? You can lawyer that up.
Yeah.
I move that Halifax and West Community Council recommend Regional Council make appointments to Halifax Municipal Planning Advisory Committee as discussed in the in-camera and private session. So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any further comments? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, say nay. All right. With that, we already did public participation. We have no added items. And the date of our next meeting is January 18, 2022. Goodness gracious, we're saying New Year. With that, I call for adjournment. Adjourned by Councilor Morris. Thank you, colleagues. We don't have anyone in the audience except for our gracious folks in the back there. So have a great holiday, folks, and thank you all the staff and everyone else that made a good year go by with Halifax West. So with that, we are adjourned, and thank you.